Lieutenant Mara Steele stepped carefully at the edge of the forest on Kashara Prime. Tall trees with trunks thicker than her arm rose into a glowing canopy. Their leaves shone with soft blues and purples, casting a gentle light on the ground. Below, the air was warm and humid, filled with the smell of damp earth and strange, sweet flowers. Mara paused for a moment, taking in the view. She had trained for many months for this mission, but nothing on her home planet had prepared her for the living, breathing world before her eyes. Every step Mara made sank slightly into the soft moss that covered the forest floor. The moss felt cool under her boots, almost like a thick carpet of green. Tiny bioluminescent insects hovered nearby, leaving trails of dim light as they moved. Mara held her breath, listening to their gentle hum, as if she did not want to startle them. She kept her uniform free of dirt and debris, but inside she felt her heart beat faster with excitement. She knew that scouts before her had not returned, and she had to stay sharp. Each breath was slow and steady, as she reminded herself to focus on her mission. Her wrist console flashed softly, displaying a map of the area and information about recorded wildlife. Mara tapped a button, and the screen hummed, activating a small scanner that could detect signatures of heat, motion, or unusual energy. She pointed the scanner ahead, watching data scroll across the glass surface. The trees seemed to lean toward each other under the weight of their own branches, and vines hung like thick ropes, crisscrossing above. The scanner picked up small, glowing animals moving in the underbrush. None of them appeared dangerous, but Mara knew how strange this world could be. She reminded herself to check every reading twice. As she moved deeper, the colors of the forest grew brighter. Patches of glowing fungus clung to the bases of trees like lanterns lighting her path. Strange flowers lit from within opened and closed slowly. Their petals shimmered in shades of violet and green. Whenever a breeze passed, the flowers released tiny spores that drifted in thin clouds. Mara's suit filtered the air, but she still felt the tickle of spores against her face shield. She tried not to stir them too much, so she stepped lightly and spoke softly to herself. Keep calm. Watch each step. Stay aware. Even in her own mind, she repeated, Lieutenant Mara. Steele felt each footstep sink into the soft, glowing moss as she ventured deeper into the bioluminescent forest. The leaves above her head shimmered in shades of pale blue and violet, glowing faintly like tiny stars captured in glass. She held her breath for a moment, listening. The gentle hum of unseen insects mixed with the distant rustling of leaves, creating a strange lullaby that made her pulse quicken. Mara's scanner beeped softly, showing a small movement behind her. Nothing large, perhaps a small creature. She paused, standing as still as a statue, her eyes searching the shadows between the tree trunks. She hoped it was just a harmless animal, but in this forest even small creatures could be dangerous. She adjusted the strap of her pack and continued walking, trying to appear calm. The trees grew taller and closer together, their trunks twisting like giant serpents. Faint tendrils of fog drifted near the ground, curling around her boots. In the distance, she glimpsed a cluster of glowing fungi that lit the path ahead like lanterns. Mara felt relief at seeing the pale green glow, believing it marked a trail used by other scouts. She shifted her handheld scanner to measure energy, signatures. The display showed a faint reading, something moving at a steady pace, roughly her height but slightly taller. She swallowed hard and moved faster, footsteps echoing on the soft ground. Suddenly, a sharp rustle to her right made her spin around. A sleek shape darted behind a thick trunk, its movement too smooth to be any normal animal. Mara's pulse thundered in her ears. She reached for the stun pistol at her hip, but hesitated. The weapon was heavy, its energy cells glowing faintly. She forced herself to remain calm and activated a small spotlight on her wrist console. The beam cut through the dim light, revealing nothing but twisted roots and more glowing fungus. She clicked off the light, conscious that any extra glow might attract unwanted attention. She whispered to herself, "Stay focused. Only move when you must." Mara slowed her pace, bending to inspect a series of deep footprints in the soft moss. Each print was wider than her hand and had edges that glowed faintly where the moss had been compressed. She traced the marks with her finger, Realizing that whatever left them walked on two legs and wore some kind of heavy footwear, her heart sank. These were not the prints of any known animal. They belonged to something intelligent, something that might be tracking her. She stood and peered over her shoulder, scanning the path she had taken. The deeper she looked, the thicker. The forest seemed to grow. Trees crowded each other, leaves brushing together like whispered secrets, RP thorns. She heard the Mirakai behind her, heavy footsteps pounding against the soft ground. Every time Mara thought she had lost her pursuer, the warrior's silhouette appeared through the glowing haze. Its stride was smooth and confident, as though it knew the forest better than Mara did. She tried to stay calm, focusing on her breathing, but her heart raced with each step. The trees began to thin, and she saw a sliver of open sky overhead for the first time since entering the forest. She dashed toward it, hoping the open area would give her room to maneuver. Just as she emerged, into a clearing, she stumbled and fell, catching her elbow on a glowing rock. Pain shot through her arm, but she forced herself to stand. The clearing was bathed in soft moonlight that leaked through a break in the canopy. In its center was a circle of stones, each etched with strange, glowing symbols. The air here was, still, filled with an uneasy silence. Mara stood straighter, glancing around for any sign of her pursuer. The only sound was the distant hum of the forest. The Mirakai stepped into the clearing, energy blade in hand. The armor's glow reflected on the rocks, making the symbols flicker. Mara's breath caught in her throat as she realized she was trapped. The clearing was too small to allow a quick escape. She lifted her pistol, aiming at the Mirakai's chest. Her hands shook slightly, but she held steady. The warrior paused, at the edge of the circle, head tilted as if studying the stones. Its breathing was even, controlled. Then it spoke in a low, clear voice that echoed in the still air. The words were in common, the universal language, but the accent was unfamiliar and melodic. Mara tightened her grip on the pistol, not lowering it. She waited for the warrior to make its next move. A long moment passed, filled only with the soft hum of the forest. Then the Mirakai slowly lowered its blade, tilting its head as if curious. Mara's pulse slowed slightly, and she realized the warrior was not attacking immediately. It seemed to be waiting, as though trying to decide what to do. Mara then spoke, her voice steady but quiet. "I mean no harm. I seek only safe passage." The Mirakai's eyes flickered, and it responded in a language Mara barely recognized, then switched to common. "All humans in this forest are trespassers. You must follow me." Its tone held no anger, but an unshakable authority. Mara hesitated. She glanced around the clearing one last time, searching for any hidden path. The Mirakai lowered its blade completely and gestured toward a narrow passage at the far edge of the clearing. Fear and relief warred inside her. She knew following the warrior could lead to safety or something worse. She inhaled deeply, nodding slowly. She kept the pistol raised, just in case, and walked toward the passage. The Mirakai watched her, every step, blade ready but not threatening. As they moved together through the faintly glowing forest, Mara noticed how the warrior's strides were confident and precise. The Mirakai did not glance back even once, as if it already knew she was there. Mara followed closely, heart still pounding, trying to read the warrior's intentions. Each step took them further from the clearing and deeper into the forest's mysterious heart. The moonlight above flickered as new leaves shifted, casting dancing patterns on the moss-covered ground. A soft breeze carried the scents of unknown flowers and wet earth. Mara kept her eyes on the path, unsure of what came next, but determined to stay calm. She reminded herself, one step at a time. Observe, learn. With each breath, she felt a small sliver of hope. Perhaps this pursuit would teach her more about the forest and about the Mirakai themselves. The warrior led her onward, its figure merging with the glowing trees like a shadow made of light. Mara followed, determined to face whatever came next with courage and patience. Mara followed the Mirakai warrior deeper into the glowing forest. The soft green light from the bioluminescent plants cast long dancing shadows on the mossy ground. Overhead, Vines hung like curtains, and every few steps, she could see small glowing spores drifting in the air. The warrior moved with quiet confidence, never glancing back, as if it already knew Mara would follow. Her heart still pounded, but she forced herself to keep breathing slowly. Each footstep sank slightly into the soft moss, and she made sure not to rush or stumble. The trees here grew even taller, their trunks twisting into strange shapes. Faint glimmers of violet and blue traced their bark, as though veins of light ran through every trunk. Mara held up her scanner again. It showed no immediate dangers, but she knew sensors could sometimes miss fast-moving creatures. She kept her stun pistol ready at her side, though she hoped she would not need to use it. The warrior glanced at her once, its violet eyes narrowing slightly, as though measuring her determination. After walking for several minutes, the pair came upon a small clearing. In the center stood a stone circle barely visible under layers of moss and vines. The stones were smooth and rounded, each as tall as Mara's waist. Faint runes glowed on their surface, the same pale green as the forest light. The warrior paused at the edge of the clearing and looked down at the runes. Its armored shoulders relaxed for the first time, and it spoke in a low voice in common. "This was once a place of peace for my people." Mara stepped forward slowly, curious. She felt a soft hum under her boots as she crossed into the circle. Mara knelt and ran her gloved fingers over the glowing runes. They felt warm to the touch, like they were alive. She traced one symbol that looked like a spiral. As she did, the symbol brightened and a soft pulse of light spread to the other stones. The warrior watched her face, its violet eyes reflecting both caution and something like pride. After a moment, the light faded, and the runes returned to their faint glow. Mara stood and asked, "What does this place mean?" The warrior lowered its head and said, "Long ago, before the war, Mirakai gathered here under the light of the full moon. We shared stories and honored our ancestors." The warrior paused, as if remembering. "Now these stones lie unused, but they still hold our history." Mara felt a mixture of respect and sadness. She gently touched one stone again, then stood and followed as the warrior turned away. They moved on a narrow path that led away from the clearing. The trees here seemed closer together, and the air smelled of wet earth and sweet nectar. Mara noticed a faint trickle of water sound and realized they were approaching a small stream. The warrior stopped at the stream's edge. The water was clear but glowed faintly green as it flowed over smooth rocks. Tiny fish with glowing stripes swam in the shallow water. The warrior glanced at Mara and then crossed without hesitation, vaulting over the stones with ease. Mara hesitated for a moment, then stepped onto a flat stone in the middle of the stream. The stone wobbled slightly under her weight. She shifted her balance, then jumped to a second stone. Water splashed around her ankles, and small fish darted away in quick bursts of light. She reached the far bank and helped herself up onto the mossy ground. The warrior waited silently, its glowing armor reflecting in the water below. On the other side of the stream, the forest changed. The air felt cooler, and the glow of the plants was softer. Violet flowers in drooping clusters hung from low branches, and glowing mushrooms formed tight circles at the base of some trees. Mara crouched to examine one mushroom. Its cap was the size of her hand, and when she touched it lightly, it glowed brighter for a moment before fading again. She picked a small piece and examined it, wondering if it might be edible or useful. The warrior made a sound, something like a low hum, and Mara put the mushroom piece back, careful not to disturb the circle too much. They continued through the soft glow, and soon the forest floor began to slope upward. The warrior led Mara to a rise where the trees parted, revealing a large clearing. In the center stood a tall spire of stone, covered in moss and vines. Light from above fell in a single beam onto the spire, making it look as if it were crowned by a halo. Bird-like creatures with glowing wings flitted around the spire's top, calling out in strange musical notes. Mara felt a sense of awe. She pointed to the spire and asked quietly, "What is this place?" The warrior stepped closer to the spire and laid a hand on its rough surface. This was a watchtower in ancient times, it said. From here, my people watched for enemies coming from the north. Now it stands empty, a reminder of battles long ended. Mara ran a fingertip along a carved symbol on the spire. As she did, the symbol glowed softly, and for a moment, she sensed a faint vibration beneath her fingers. The warrior said, "The spire still holds our hopes. Even after war, we must remember who we were." Mara nodded, feeling the weight of those words. She wondered if her own people had lost such places on their homeworld. She looked at the warrior and said, "You guard these places even now. Why do you chase me instead of helping me?" The warrior paused, eyes narrowing as if choosing its words. "Protocol demands that any human here could be a spy, but I see you are not a threat. You seek only survivors, yes?" Mara took a deep breath and replied, "Yes. I want to find my people. Just keep me alive, please." The warrior studied her for a long moment and then nodded once. They moved around the base of the spire, searching for a hidden entrance. Mara used her scanner to look for heat signatures. She found a small, dark crevice at the back of the spire. The warrior led her to it and knelt, placing a hand on a hidden panel covered in moss. The panel glowed briefly, then slid aside, revealing a narrow tunnel leading downward. A faint breeze came from the darkness, carrying the smell of cool stone and damp air. Mara crouched to enter the tunnel and the warrior followed, its armor clinking softly in the confined space. The air grew cooler as they descended. The tunnel walls were carved with ancient runes, each glowing faintly. Mara reached out and touched one. It felt smooth, almost like polished glass. As her fingers traced the rune, it brightened and a soft hum filled the tunnel. Mara pulled back, startled, but then realized the runes were responding to her touch as though recognizing her presence. The warrior placed a hand on her shoulder, and she felt a calm wash over her. They walked deeper into the tunnel, and the light from the runes guided their path. The warrior slowed, turning to Mara and speaking in a softer tone. "These tunnels lead to an old sanctuary. Few Mirakai enter now. We are almost there." Mara's heart pounded in her chest as they moved forward. The runes glowed brighter, and the air smelled faintly of flowers. She felt as if she had stepped into another world, one filled with history and quiet magic. As they emerged from the tunnel, Mara blinked against the sudden brightness. They stood in a large chamber carved from stone, with a high ceiling that arched like the inside of a shell. Pillars lined the room, each wrapped in glowing vines. In the center was a shallow pool of water, its surface still and mirror-like. Above the pool, a single beam of moonlight shone through a hole in the ceiling, making the water sparkle. The warrior approached the pool and knelt, gazing at its surface. Mara walked carefully toward the edge, her reflection mingling with the glow from the pillars, penning in the ceiling, making the water shimmer like liquid glass. The air in the chamber was cool and smelled faintly of wet stone and ancient flowers. Mara felt a calm breeze drift down from the opening above, lifting the fine hairs on her arms. For a long moment, neither warrior nor human spoke. Then the Mirakai turned and spoke in a low voice. "You have shown respect for our history. Few humans understand what this place means." Mara nodded, her eyes still fixed on the water. She said quietly, "I want to learn about your people. I want to help if I can." The warrior rose and eased the strange helmet from her head. Her face was noble, with sharp cheekbones and skin like pale ivory. Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She did not offer her name at first, but Mara bowed briefly in greeting. "Thank you for guiding me," Mara said. "I am Lieutenant Mara Steele from the starship Aurora." The Mirakai studied Mara's face. After a moment, she offered her name. "I am Sarika, daughter of the clan Nura." Her voice was soft but carried weight. She knelt again and placed her hand on the stone floor. The runes on the pillars flared brighter as if responding to her presence. "This place holds our memories. It remembers who we were, even if we forget ourselves." Mara moved closer to the pool, eyes wide. "How does it remember?" she asked. Sarika did not answer at once. Instead, she pointed to one of the glowing runes on a pillar. The rune looked like two circles connected by a line. These runes respond to our life force, Sarika explained. When we touch the stones, they show visions of our past. They show trials we have faced. Curiosity warmed Mara's chest. She lifted a gloved hand and touched the rune. It glowed brighter, sending ripples across the pool's surface. Mara watched as the water shifted. At first it looked like mist swirling in moonlight. Then shapes formed. Tall figures in flowing robes standing on a grassy plain. Sarika knelt beside her, eyes on the pool. The figures raised long spears, and distant machines rumbled in the dark sky. Mara understood these were Mirikai warriors, before the war, defending their world. She felt the sadness in the scene. Battles lost, lands burned. The images flickered, and then a lone Mirikai woman stood on a hill, looking north. Mara gasped as she recognized Sarika's face on that vision. That lone warrior turned and closed her eyes, then reached out her hand in a gesture of peace. The image faded, then changed to show a human starship in orbit above Kashara Prime. A group of Mirikai watched from below, unsure whether to trust the strangers from the sky. Mara felt a pang in her heart. She realized her own people had once been met with fear and hesitation. The image dissolved, leaving ripples on the water's surface. Sarika rose slowly, her violet eyes damp. That was me, she said quietly. I tried to make peace, but war came anyway. Her voice quivered, betraying emotion. Mara gently placed a hand on her arm. I'm sorry, she whispered. She thought of her own crew, lost somewhere, here on this planet. I never meant to bring war here. I came only to find survivors. Sarika nodded, then turned away from the pool. We must leave this place soon, she said. Our presence here may awaken old defenses. Mara's heart skipped. Defenses? What kind of defenses? Sarika pointed to a dark archway on the far side of the chamber. This sanctuary was once protected by ancient guardians, machines left behind by our ancestors. They wait in hidden tunnels below. If we stay too long, they will rise to protect the sacred ground. Mara swallowed hard. Can we avoid them? Sarika studied the floor runes, then said, There is a path that leads around them, follow me. She turned, and Mara followed through the archway. The air grew cooler, and the glow from the runes faded until they needed to rely on their wrist lights. The tunnel walls were carved with more runes, but these were darkened by age. Water dripped from cracks above, and the floor was slick with moss. Mara took slow, careful steps. Sarika moved ahead without hesitation, as though she had traveled this path many times. Mara's scanner beeped occasionally, warning of weak structural supports. She paused when a low rumble filled the air. The ground shook slightly, and dust fell from the ceiling. Mara's heart pounded. What was that? She asked. Sarika did not slow. What looked like thin strands of glowing energy. Mara swallowed and shuffled forward. The guardian's limbs reached lower, scraping the stone ledge inches from her boots. She kept her eyes down and her steps slow. Beside her, Sarika moved like a shadow, confident and sure. As they passed under the mechanical arm, it snapped downward, blocking their path. Sarika stepped forward and placed her hand flat on the runed plates of the arm. The glow flickered, and whatever power animated the guardian stuttered. The arm froze in place. Mara watched as Sarika read the runes with her eyes, her eyebrows furrowed in concentration. After a moment, the glow faded, and the arm retracted silently. Sarika led Mara past and said, The runes respond to those who know their language. I speak them. Mara nodded, humbled. Thank you. They hurried on until the tunnel opened into a second chamber. Here, lanterns hung on the walls, glowing with pale blue light. The floor was smooth stone, and in the center lay a mosaic depicting A Mirakai warrior and a human standing side by side. The images were outlined with glowing runes. Mara gasped. They knew about humans here? She asked. Sarika nodded. Long ago, humans visited our world. We lived in peace for a time. She touched the mosaic's runes. This was our promise of friendship. Mara knelt to examine the mosaic. The warrior's armor in the image looked ancient, made of a material like polished bone. The human wore clothing Mara did not recognize, but the human held a hand up in greeting. Bits of colored stone inlaid for hair and skin tones had faded, but the runes around the figures were still bright. Mara traced the human's face. They look like me, she said softly. Like us. Sarika placed a hand on her shoulder. This room marks a vow. We would not harm those who came in peace, and they would protect us. Mara felt tears sting her eyes. She realized how fragile trust could be between different peoples. I will honor that vow, she said. I promise. They stood together in silence for a moment, each feeling the weight of history. Then Sarika turned, leading Mara toward a narrow passage at the far end of the chamber. Light from small, floor lanterns guided their way. As they walked, Sarika said, Beyond this passage is the edge of our territory. From there, you may continue your search for survivors. I will escort you to the border. Mara nodded, grateful for the warriors' help. They reached a small exit carved into the stone. The lantern light faded behind them and they emerged into the forest once more. The glow of the bioluminescent trees welcomed them, and the cool night air brushed against Mara's skin. She looked at Sarika, whose violet eyes reflected the forest light. Thank you, Mara said, for everything. Lieutenant Mara. Steele walked beside Sarika through the dense forest, moving toward the Mirakai border. The moonlight filtered through the glowing leaves, casting a silver-blue light on their path. Each step crunched softly on a carpet of glowing moss. The air was still except for the distant hum of strange insects. Mara held her scanner in one hand, watching each reading carefully. Sarika's pace was slow but steady. The warriors' eyes scanned the trees like a hawk looking for prey. Mara felt safe with the warrior beside her, but she also felt the weight of every step. This journey was far from over. After a few minutes, they reached a clearing where tall grasses shifted in the light. In the center stood a cluster of stone pillars covered with vines. The pillars formed a circle, and in the middle was a stone obelisk taller than two humans standing on each other's shoulders. Glowing runes covered the obelisk's surface, shining in soft violet. Sarika stopped at the edge of the circle and leaned forward to run her fingers gently over the stone. Mara moved closer, curious. Sarika spoke in a low voice. This place marks the limit of my clan's lands. Beyond here, the forest changes. It becomes older, wilder. She looked up at Mara. If you continue alone from this point, you risk getting lost. The plants and animals out there follow different rules. Mara nodded. She tapped her scanner on the obelisk. The device beeped as it decoded the runes. The runes say, only those with clean intent may pass. Mara read aloud. She looked at Sarika. What does it mean by clean intent? Sarika smiled softly. It means only those who come without harm may cross. If you carry anger or fear, the forest will not let you pass. Mara closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her mission, to find survivors and to honor the promise she made in the sanctuary. She felt a calm warmth in her chest. She opened her eyes. I carry no anger. I carry hope. Sarika placed her hand on Mara's shoulder, then stepped forward. Together, they walked into the circle. As they did, the runes on the pillars glowed brighter for a moment. A soft breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Mara felt a gentle pulse in the air, as if the forest breathed around them. When they stepped out of the circle, the ground beneath them changed. The moss disappeared, and the soil became dark and rich. Strange vines with bright blue flowers draped from the branches above. Mara felt a thrill of excitement. "This place feels different," she said. "It feels more alive." Sarika nodded. "It is older. Its magic is older. Many things live here that you have never seen." They moved forward, carefully following a narrow path between towering ferns. The ferns were so tall that Mara could not see the sky. She felt as if she were walking under a green cathedral roof. Every few steps she saw small creatures scurry away. A tiny rodent with glowing eyes, a spider that danced on its web like a fairy. None of these creatures paid attention to Mara and Sarika. They lived their lives in this place as if nothing else existed. After a long walk, they reached a small river. The water was clear and shimmered in the moonlight. The sound of water flowing over smooth stones was like music. Sarika knelt beside the riverbank and cupped her hands to scoop water into her mouth. Mara followed, lifting her helmet to let the cool air touch her face. She knelt and drank too. The water tasted sweet and cool like the first breath of morning. She felt refreshed. Sarika rose and pointed upstream. "There is a cave not far from here. It was once a resting place for travelers. Some humans may be there." Mara's heart leapt. "You think survivors are in that cave?" Sarika nodded. "Perhaps, or they may have moved on. But it is worth checking." Mara took a deep breath. "Lead the way." They walked along the riverbank. Small fish darted in the shallows, their scales flashing like tiny mirrors in the moonlight. Fireflies danced above the water, leaving trails of light. Soon they came to a dark opening in the rock. Vines hung over the entrance like green curtains. A faint glow came from inside. Mara could hear soft murmurs like distant voices talking quietly. She reached for her pistol but paused. The voices did not sound angry or frightened. They sounded calm. She nodded to Sarika, who stepped by Aurora. The three humans looked up at her. Their eyes widened. One of them, a tall man with dark hair, rose shakily to his feet. He spoke with a trembling voice. "We thought no one was left alive. You are human." Mara smiled gently. "I am here to help." "Why did you stay here?" The man shook his head. "Our group got separated during the crash. We have been surviving on food from the forest. But we heard stories of Mirikai guardians. We stayed here hoping they would not find us." Mara knelt and placed a hand on his arm. "You are safe now. This is Sarika, a Mirikai warrior. She helped me reach you." Sarika stepped forward, bowing her head slightly. "I mean no harm," she said in a soft but steady voice. "The forest allows you to stay here if you have good intent. I will ensure no harm comes to you from my people." The man's eyes filled with gratitude. He bowed his head. "Thank you." Mara helped the other two survivors to their feet. One was a young woman with sandy hair. The other was a boy no older than 14. Mara noticed his wide eyes and thin frame. His gaze flicked between her and Sarika. Mara crouched and smiled at him. "Hello. I am Lieutenant Mara. You are safe now." The boy let out a small breath and nodded. "Thank you. I am Jonah." The survivors told Mara and Sarika what had happened. Their group had been scouting for food near the crash site when a rain of glowing spores filled the air. They fled north and got lost in the forest. They ran into creatures that circled them but did not attack. They burned shelters of woven vines and hid until the creatures left. After many nights, they found this cave. They were afraid to leave because of stories of machines that guarded the forest's heart. Mara listened and felt sadness for their struggle. She offered them water and simple rations from her pack. The survivors drank gratefully. Mara felt hope in her chest. She had found the people she came to save. She also felt pride. Sarika had helped her, and now two species stood together. Sarika spoke. "You must move quickly. Others may be looking for you." Jonah looked frightened. "Will they come to this cave?" Sarika nodded. "It is known among Mirikai maps. I will guide you to a safer place." Mara rose and helped Jonah to his feet. She said softly, "We will lead you to a Mirikai outpost where you can rest and plan your journey home." The survivors packed their few belongings. Mara stayed close to Jonah, offering support. Sarika led them back toward the river. The moon still shone brightly, guiding their path. The forest around them seemed quieter now, as if the trees watched in silence. Every step they took felt like a step toward a new hope. As they walked, Mara looked up at Sarika. The warrior's face was calm. Their eyes met and Mara nodded in thanks. Sarika returned the gesture, a small smile touching her lips. Together, human and alien, they led the survivors deeper into the forest, toward a future they would shape together. Lieutenant, Mara Steele moved steadily along the narrow forest trail, helping the three survivors, Kellen, Elise, and the boy Jonah, navigate around thick roots and low branches. Sarika walked beside them, her violet eyes scanning each tree and shadow. The Mirakai warrior carried a glowing staff made from a single polished branch carved with ancient runes that pulsed in time with the forest's life. Every few steps, Sarika tapped the staff against the ground, softly illuminating the path ahead. The survivors had grown quiet. Kellen, the tall man with dark hair, carried a small pack containing sparse rations. Elise, her sandy hair tied back, supported Jonah's arm as he shuffled along. Jonah's eyes, still wide with cautious hope, stayed fixed on Mara and Sarika. The boy was thin, but his strong will showed in the way he lifted his chin when he walked. Mara glanced back at them and offered a reassuring smile. She thought about her crew on the Aurora. She hoped they were safe, but for now her focus remained on getting these three to safety. A faint rustling echoed from the underbrush on their left. Jonah stopped and froze. "Something there?" whispered. Mara nodded and raised her pistol, but lowered the muzzle as she saw a small, glowing creature dart into view. It looked like a rabbit, but its fur was silver and its eyes glowed green. It froze in the glare of Mara's wrist light before bounding deeper into the forest. Jonah exhaled, and Kellen let out a short laugh. "Just a forest hare," Kellen said. "I thought it was one of those hunting birds again." Mara lowered her pistol and exhaled, feeling tension ease from her shully bridge dipped beneath her. She glanced down at the darkness and felt her heart flutter, but she thought of the survivors waiting on the other side. She lifted her head and continued forward. When Mara reached solid ground, she turned to watch as Sarika stepped carefully across. The warrior's eyes never left the ropes. In only a few steps, Sarika was beside Mara. The group gathered on the far side. Sarika touched her staff to the ground and the ropes pulsed briefly with light, as if the forest blessed their crossing. Mara exhaled and glanced back at the survivors, all safe now. She felt gratitude toward Sarika and pride that the forest permitted their passage. They walked on, leaving the chasm behind. The forest grew denser and the trees seemed to press closer together. A pale mist settled on the ground, swirling around low-hanging branches. Jonah clung to Elise's hand, his footsteps small and careful. Kellen walked at the back, scanning the forest floor with a handheld scanner. Above them, glowing ferns formed, a high canopy that blocked most of the moonlight. Only patches of blue light guided their path. At the end of the trail, a clearing opened, revealing a ring of ancient stone pillars similar to the ones marking Sarika's clan lands. But these pillars were larger and more elaborate. Each was carved with scenes of Mirakai and humans standing side by side, once friends, once allies. The runes along the pillars glowed violet, matching Sarika's staff and their memories. Mara felt a wave of emotion. She stepped forward and touched one of the pillars. The runes pulsed warmly under her fingertips. She sensed respect from the stones themselves. Sarika bowed her head. "This is the old outpost," she said softly. "Humans and Mirakai once shared this place. Now only memories remain." Mara looked at the survivors. "We should rest here," she said. Kellen scanned the area. "It seems safe," he said. "No active defenses detected." Elise set down her small pack and reached for Jonah, smoothing his hair. "Let's take a moment," she said. "We all need to catch our breath." Mara knelt beside Jonah and offered him a sealed ration bar from her pack. Jonah's eyes lit up as he took it. He bit into it slowly, chewing with care. "Thank you," he said, his voice small. Mara nodded and offered a water pouch. He drank gratefully, then looked up at her with gratitude. Mara felt her chest warm, with hope. Kellen and Elise unpacked the thin blankets they carried. They spread them on the soft moss between the pillars. Kellen placed his small device on the ground, a solar-powered lamp that cast a dim greenish light. Inside the clearing, the runes on the pillars brightened, filling the space with gentle violet light. It felt like a protective cocoon. The forests, noises seemed to soften as if the trees respected this place of peace. Mara placed her pack beside her and took out a small object covered in cloth. She lifted the cloth to reveal a simple data pad. She tapped it and showed an image to Kellen and Elise, a star map. "This shows where the Aurora crashed," she said. "From here, I plan to return to human territory and find more survivors. I will not leave until all are safe." Kellen nodded. "I lost friends on that ship," he said quietly. "I want to go back and help." Mara placed a hand on his arm. "We will. Soon. Right now, you must rest and regain strength." Kellen lowered his head and closed his eyes. Elise held Jonah close as he drifted to sleep, his small chest rising and falling beneath the thin blanket. Sarika knelt beside Mara. "The forest rewards kindness," she said. "You have shown kindness to these travelers." Mara looked at the sleeping survivors. "We all survive because we help one another," she replied. Sarika stood and touched her staff to the ground. The runes on the pillars glowed a bit brighter, spreading warmth through the clearing. Mara felt a calm settle in her chest. Around them, the forest pulsed softly with life. The stone pillars stood like silent guards, reminding them that unity between species was possible. Mara settled onto her blanket, leaning against one of the pillars. She looked at Sarika, whose face glowed in violet light. They shared a moment of quiet understanding. Neither needed to speak. The forest, the pillars, and the survivors spoke for them. In that peaceful pause, Mara felt hope blossoming like the glowing flowers above. She knew the next step, returning to the Aurora, would be difficult, but she also knew she would not face it alone. With Sarika and these survivors by her side, she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. Lieutenant Mara Steele awoke in the moonlit clearing to the soft murmur of the forest. The survivors, Kellen, Elise, and Jonah, slept quietly on their thin blankets among the ancient stone pillars. The gentle violet glow of the runes danced across their peaceful faces. Beside Mara, Sarika rested against one pillar, her breathing slow and steady. Mara sat up slowly, careful not to startle anyone. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs. She rose and glanced around the clearing. The forest seemed at peace, as if it held its breath, granting them a brief moment of rest. Mara checked her scanner and saw faint signals drifting toward human territory. They were weak, but they meant that the Aurora's outpost might be listening. Mara allowed herself a small smile. Today she would reunite more of her people and honor the promise she made. Gently, she knelt by Jonah's side and placed a hand on his shoulder. The boy stirred and opened his eyes, blinking at the moonlight. When he recognized Mara, he gave a small smile. Mara whispered, "You slept well?" Jonah nodded, stretching his small arms. Mara patted his back and whispered, "Soon, you'll see your family again." Jonah's gaze drifted to Sarika, who opened her violet eyes and gave a soft nod of greeting. Jonah's smile grew wider. He sat up and pulled his thin blanket around his shoulders. As the others began to stir, Mara walked to where Sarika knelt. The warrior's bare feet rested on the glowing moss at the base of the pillar. Mara held out a small metal flask. Inside was cool water drawn from the river. Sarika took the flask with both hands and drank slowly, careful not to waste a drop. When she finished, she paused and handed the flask back. Mara bowed her head slightly in thanks. Sarika's violet eyes shone in the rune light. Without words, they shared determination. Their work was almost done. Not far away, Kellen sat up and rubbed his eyes. The tall man scanned the clearing, with a tired but hopeful expression. Elise helped Jonah to his feet. As Jonah stood, he held out a small wooden carving, a gift he had made during their journey. It was a simple figure of a Mirikai warrior holding a human's hand. He handed it to Sarika, who accepted it with a nod and a rare, gentle smile. The runes on the pillars flickered brighter as if acknowledging the quiet ceremony. Mara cleared her throat and spoke in a calm voice. "We need to move toward human territory," she said. "The Aurora's signal may still be open. If not, we will guide more survivors. Here to this outpost." Kellen stood and slapped his vest thoughtfully. "I remember a safe location near the crash site," he said. "It's small, but some of our people might have gathered there." Elise straightened her shoulders. "Then we should go now. The forest is calmer in the morning light." Jonah looked up at Mara. "Will the Mirikai help us again?" Mara nodded. "Sarika will stay with us until we reach the edge of their lands." Jonah's face brightened at the thought of traveling with the brave warrior. Sarika rose and placed her glowing staff against the ground. The runes along its length pulsed softly with green light. She spoke in common, her accent melodic. "Follow me. The path is safe." Mara gestured for the survivors to gather their few possessions. They packed into their small packs, scraps of fabric, a few ration bars, and Kellen's handheld scanner. Jonah found a piece of cord and gently tied Sarika's wooden carving to his belt, giving the warrior one last, heartfelt look before turning to join the others. They left the clearing together, stepping onto the narrow path that wound toward human territory. The forest around them was alive with early morning sounds. Soft breezes rustled the leaves above, and tiny birds with luminous feathers darted from branch to branch. Mara kept her scanner active, watching for the faintest sign of human transmissions. Sarika led them with sure steps, her staff lighting the way where shadows gathered between trees. After walking for nearly an hour, they reached a gentle slope that led down to a small river. The water glimmered in the morning light, and a thin mist hovered above its surface. Mara knelt and scooped water into her hands, letting it crash over her face. The coolness opened her senses. Behind her, Kellen and Elise did the same, and Jonah splashed at the water's edge. Sarika knelt and touched the river with her bare hand. The runes on her staff pulsed rapidly, as if the magic of the forest responded to her touch. Mara looked up and spoke quietly. "I think that transmitter is a few clicks north near the crash site." She tapped her scanner and showed a small blip on the display. Kellen's face hardened with resolve. "Then that's where we must go next." Elise took Jonah's hand. "Be careful," she said to the boy. Jonah nodded, determination shining in his eyes. They followed the riverbank for another half hour until they came to an overgrown slope leading up to the crash site. The remains of the shuttle lay half buried under vines and glowing mushrooms. The metal was scorched in places by fire, but much of the hull remained intact. The once sharp edges of metal were now dulled by moss and time. Mara's heart tightened at the sight. She remembered the moment the shuttle had gone down, the alarms, the impact, and the desperate scramble to escape. Now she stood at the edge of a place filled with painful memories. Sarika motioned for silence as they crept closer. The air was still, and the forest held its breath. They walked along the perimeter, where small fires had been lit inside, makeshift shelters. Mara saw footprints in the soil, fresh ones. She patted Kellen's shoulder. "They were here recently." Kellen nodded, scanning the area with his handheld device. "They left within the last 2 days," he said quietly. "Someone must still be nearby." Mara touched the hull gently. The metal felt cold beneath her gloves. She activated her wrist console, sending out a short-range transmission. "This is Lieutenant Mara Steele of the starship Aurora. If there are any survivors in the area, respond now." The forest echoed her words. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a weak, static crackle filled her comm. "Lieutenant?" a tired voice answered. We're here. I'm Commander Ilya Jacobs. I'm speaking from the Western Ridge. Mara's heart surged. Commander Jacobs, this is Mara Steele. I am here with survivors. We will come to you. Stay where you are. Help is on the way. The voice crackled once more. Thank you. Hurry. Mara turned to Sarika and spoke with gratitude. You have guided us this far. Will you help me reach Commander Jacobs? Sarika inclined her head. Yes. This is the edge of my land. After that, the forest changes, but I will stay until we find the ridge. Sarika's staff pulsed, brighter. Mara led the group up the slope along a narrow trail cut by explorers long ago. The climb was steep, and the forest grew denser. Vines hung like curtains and bright flowers blocked parts of the path. Jonah stumbled, but Elise caught his arm. Kellen offered his arm to Mara for support. Together they moved steadily upward. Sarika paused under a great tree with wide roots. This tree marks the last safe ground, she said softly. Past here, the forest trials those who pass. Mara placed a hand on the rough bark and bowed her head in respect. Thank you for your help, she said. I will not forget this. Sarika touched Mara's shoulder and spoke gently. May courage guide your steps. Mara watched as Sarika turned and walked back down the path she had led them on. The staff's glow dimmed until it vanished among the leaves. Mara felt a sudden ache at losing her friend and guide, but stood firm. She took a deep breath and led the survivors onward under the canopy of ancient trees. At last, they reached the western ridge. The forest opened to a rocky lookout, where Commander Ilya Jacobs and 2 other survivors waited beside a small comm station. Ilya's hair was streaked with gray and his eyes shone with relief. When he saw Mara and the others, he stepped forward. Mara, you came. Mara smiled and offered a hand to Ilya. We promised we would find you. Ilya helped Elise and Jonah down to firmer ground. He embraced Kellen, who had once been his close friend. Kellen's shoulders shook as he held Ilya. Mara watched the reunion with warm eyes. She then turned to the small comm station, an antiquated device covered in vines. She tapped the power switch and waited. The screen flickered to life, showing the familiar insignia of the Aurora's command network. Taking a deep breath, Mara spoke into her comm unit. This is Lieutenant Mara Steele, to the starship Aurora. Do you copy? The forest seemed to hold its breath for a moment. Then, steady reply came. Lieutenant Steele, this is Captain Amina Farid of the Aurora. We read you loud and clear. Mara's chest tightened as she imagined the faces of her crew listening to her voice. Captain, we are here with survivors from the crash. I request immediate extraction and medical assistance for 14 people, total, including Mirakai and human. A faint cheer rose through the comm. Captain Farid's voice was calm and proud. We are en route, Lieutenant. Prepare the location. We will be there in T-minus 30 minutes. Mara exhaled, relief flooding her. She turned to Ilya and whispered, Help is coming. Ilya placed a hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Elise knelt beside Jonah, holding him close as he looked up at Mara. The boy's eyes glowed with wonder and relief. Mara raised her voice to the small group. We made it. Soon, we will all be safe. The survivors gathered close, their faces shining with hope. Mara looked at the rising sun, its rays bursting through the forest canopy like golden ribbons. She felt a surge of gratitude for Sarika's guidance, for the forest's hidden help, and for her own people's courage. In that moment, Mara knew the story of 2 species standing together would be told for generations to come. A testament to friendship, trust, and unwavering hope. As the forest quietly watched, the survivors formed a small circle, holding hands. They waited for the distant hum of the Aurora's engines, a promise of salvation. Together they faced the future, united, hopeful and grateful for the bond that had formed under the glowing trees of Kashara Prime.